Noho taha te maunga, te rotoro nui a kahu te moana, te arawa waka, te arawa tangata. Tēnā rawa atu koe, ko tau mai ki tēnei piringa kōrero, hei toha toha, hei koha no hoki ki tō tāua whānui. So, welcome. I want you to introduce yourself because you've got all the accolades and all of those sorts of things, and I don't want to miss one of them out. So if you could you please tell us ko ai koe, he hao karangatanga maha I konei.
Ka pai. Kia ora tātou whānau, ko Karen Vercoe tōku ingoa. Hiori a hau no te waka o Te Arawa, mai maki tū ki tongariro. So Karen Vercoe, Chief Executive of Te Arawa Lakes Trust.
Just Chief Executive? I don't even know where to start when it comes with your amazing journey in life, Karen. And it's exactly why you're the exact reason why we want you to start off with who you are, your connect to where you are. It's so hard to go through your CV, I'll be honest. You were a black fern, you've got an MNZM, you're the chief exec, and yet if you were to sit amongst all your whānau, you would never even think that you've achieved all these things. So if you could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself with regards to what successes you've gained and why you've achieved those things.
Well, I think probably, to be honest, the reason why I'm successful is because I come from an incredible whānau. So they've given me opportunities probably that a lot of other whānau haven't been privy to. And when I say opportunities, the ability to grow up around my kuia and karaua. So Kawana Nipia was my karaua, and my kuia, who was the queen of Ngāti Pārua, and also of Oho, I can't even remember her actual proper name, but anyway, my kuia sort of was the one that really taught me about the love for being at home, because she just loved Mauria. That was the centre of her universe. She loved being at Oho. I was really proud of the fact that she was from the Tahuri Orangi whānau. So I feel, really blessed that I was raised essentially as the oldest mokopuna of Kawana and Hira Nipia, raised with them pretty much till I was 5, and so, that awesomeness tends to rub off on you, as a kid, and then, obviously having the ability to move back home from Auckland, where my dad was in the Navy. Neil Vercoe is my dad, and so, we moved back home and just being immersed back with our whānau. And then I think the other thing too is just, on my mum's side, so my karaua is George Nipia. We never even got to meet my karaua because back in the day my kuia had actually been promised to another whānau, so she'd met him by chance because she was in the New Zealand hockey team at the same time that George was in the, Koro George was in, emerging through the All Blacks. So they met each other and had a passionate liaison, and my karaua was born. So I think in terms of my sporting background certainly comes from that side of the whānau. So that's my Ngāti Mihiroa side of the whānau, and Ngāti Kahungunu. So, I think for me, I have to say that all of my success has not really been because of myself, but it's more been because I've had the ability to hang out with some pretty cool people, some amazing people, and that sort of rubbed off. And success breeds success, so when you hang around with successful people, you hang around with people that speak positivity into your life. It was hard, so it wasn't always easy. I didn't just drop into things, but those principles of working for your whānau, putting your iwi first in your whānau, serving, the principle of service, that's really important.
I really want to talk to you about having that sort of an environment, brought up by your grandparents in the first instance. Their love, empathy, everything is poured into who you are, and then obviously from that stage you get put into schooling, education, and then you have a bit of a whānau system around you. You have siblings. Were you a competitive person by then, or what was sort of did you ever see yourself when you were like 5 years old? Did you ever see yourself in a position that you're in now, like on all the different boards that you're in, including the chief executive? Like, you would have been a 5-year-old kid. Like, what was it like back then? And then on reflection, did you see yourself sort of here? Did you have that vision?
No, not at all. So, you know, I was fortunate to be brought up with all of my cousins on my mum's side. So my nani and koro were really big on keeping us together. So I had no aspirations to do what I do. In fact, I often think, how the heck did I end up here? It was just one thing after the other. You know, you go and, like if I think about when I was put onto the Ngāti Puke a Runanga board, my karawa was the chairman then, and I got voluntold to be on that board. I was voluntold, yeah, to be on that board, and I was in my 20s, and I thought it was the most boring thing ever. But really, my koro was sowing the seeds that, you know, governance, iwi governance, and iwi service was going to be in my future. To be honest, I can still remember telling him that I'm never going to go and work for the iwi. I'm going to go and work for some Pākehā organisation, so I can just go to work and go home and have a fun life. So I'm sure he's laughing up there as he looks down on me. So no, I had no aspirations to be a black fern. I had no aspirations to be a chief executive. I just wanted to hang with my cousins and have fun. But, you know, you get put into things and then you serve, and then people, you know, they show confidence in you, so they give you more opportunity to do stuff. Really, for me, it's just come out of service. So I don't mind working hard, you know, I don't mind putting in the hard yards to do stuff, and then people have just recognised that, and, you know, I've ended up where I am.
Let's talk about where you are now. You're the chief executive of Te Arawa Lakes Trust. What does that even mean? Like, what are your roles and responsibilities? Does it go beyond your 9 to 5? Obviously, it does. But what does it mean to you, and what do you do?
Yeah, I think, you know, so obviously my karawa, Morihu Te Kiriko, was a founding board member, and also my other karawa on my dad's side, you know, Major Te Whati Vercoe was also a previous chairman, and I've had lots of other karawa that have been previous chairman. I think for me it was really the opportunity to add to the kōrero for our whānau, so I know that both of them did an incredible job. You know, we're rangatira in their own right, and probably rangatira that I'm not too sure whether we have the same type of rangatira in today's world. You know, so the opportunity to become the chief executive and then to carry on that legacy for our whānau is really important for me. I don't want to be that auntie or that kuia or that daughter or that mokopuna that kind of lets the whānau down. So, you know, so the chief executive role is really, you know, an executive leadership role that helps to, really my job is the board set the strategy, and it's my job to make sure that the strategy is enacted. But more importantly than that, you know, a chief executive is only as good as their team, so I'm really fortunate that I've got the most incredible senior leadership team who are experts in their own right, in their own individual areas. So for me, it's kind of like back in the sports days, I might be the captain of the team, but, you know, it's a team sport, so I need to have really great team players around me. There will be times when they tell me to sit down and be quiet and give me the ball, because actually I know more than you. And then there'll be times in really clutch moments where I'll need to make the call about whether we do stuff or not. So that, in a nutshell, is it. I mean, obviously I've got a master's degree in management from the University of Auckland, so I've done all the technical things to help out. And then just, I think, my passion to want to continue the whānau legacy has really driven me to do what we've done.
You're in the iwi space. It's so different to being in the Crown, governance, or those sorts of entities that are outside. I guess I'm wanting to understand how different it is to work in an iwi structure as opposed to a government structure. What are the differences in those two different settings? Well,
if I could perhaps go back, so before I became the chief executive of Te Arawa Lakes Trust, I ran my own company, so my own consulting business, and I worked with Māori and Pacific providers and also iwi providers So I went from being really agile, nimble, make decisions on the fly, business owner. Then I stepped into iwi, and then I had a board that I had to, push up opportunities or decisions. That's a little bit of a slower process. And obviously, you can make a decision, a business decision that will impact on what happens in the business right now. But there are also generational impacts. So you have to make the decision based on what's for the benefit of the organisation now, but then also will that benefit generations to come. I think from the Crown perspective, and as you know, I'm about to go and join the Crown as a Deputy Chief Executive at DIA. So I think it's probably, I can't really speak with authority because I've only had 2 Crown appointments. I worked at Te Papa, and then I also worked at Whāmek as the Māori Health Manager, and those were very short terms. So I guess that probably from the Crown perspective, there will certainly be lots of bureaucracy, lots of policy and legislation, and certainly lots of legal things that I'll need to think about. So I'm looking forward to that. But right now, every decision that you make, you have to consider what is the impact today, but then also what's the impact intergenerationally, and that's probably the biggest thing. The other thing too is that as an iwi, as a person that serves the iwi, you have to understand that you're on call 24/7, and that your life is a little bit of a fishbowl. So, if I did anything untoward, in my life, then actually that has an impact on Te Arawa because I hold a leadership role. So yeah, I'm looking forward to not being in the fishbowl.
I guess while you're still in this fishbowl, I want to understand, or I want our listeners to kind of understand how the structure of Te Arawa Lakes Trust actually is. We've got 3 tupuna here. And the governing part of it is that 3 members represent those 3 rohe. They're made up of all our whakapapa, all grouped into this one sort of place. And it's only with regards to this entity that we have, which is Te Arawa Lakes Trust. And then we've got the assets underneath it. Those are our cultural, social and economic assets. We've got our 14 lakes, and they're intertwined with our iwi hapu and our tonga species. It's such a super mega type of system, and it's really, for some who are listening, can be sometimes quite complex and trying to make sense of that. So can you tell us your perspective and of how this Te Arawa Lakes structure actually is?
So I guess people probably should be aware that we were born out of the Te Arawa Māori Trust Board. And so the formation of the Te Arawa Māori Trust Board occurred really back in the day, and it came about, as a result of some of the legislative changes that had occurred. So the opportunity for us to set up our own trust board, I think at the time was a pretty bold move by our rangatira. Our rangatira on that board were actually elected through hapu whenua ownership, and so the trust board looked at who were the hapu and the iwi that owned different pieces of whenua, and that was how they allocated who sat on the board. So we had approximately 15 representatives that sat on the board, and then when we progressed through to settlement, and for those of you that don't know, really, basically our settlement came out of the fact that one of our karaua went fishing one morning to get him breakfast, and he was fined by a ranger because he didn't have a fishing licence. And so that really triggered a whole lot of conversations in kōrero that ended up with us taking out a claim against the Crown, which ended up being the Te Arawa Lake Settlement Act. And so as a result of that, we had to forego the structure of the Te Arawa Māori Trust Board and move to the current structure of the Te Arawa Lakes Trust, which sees us with the three tupuna here, so Kawatapuarangi, Tūhaurangi, and also Uenuku Kōpako. And so those 3 tupuna rohe then elect 3 representatives to represent them on their behalf. If you look at each of those tupuna rohe have a number of hapu that sit underneath them, and so those three people that represent that particular tupuna rohe essentially are mandated by all of those hapu. So it is, it looks a little bit complex, but I always like to take it back to whakapapa. If you think about your own whānau, there's that cousin and that auntie and that uncle, and the uri that come out of that whānau. So it's very much the same with us. I think the trick is that we were established through a legislative process, and so as a result of that, we're required to meet certain rules around that legislation. So there's kind of the legal side, but actually the fun, exciting side is really around, the protection of our lakes and our taonga species. And so whilst we're required to look after the kind of the legal stuff, at the same time we're required to really serve our people in terms of their aims and aspirations around our wai, around our taonga species, and, the intergenerational continuation of those.
Now I want to come and talk to you about, obviously, someone who instrumental in your life, which is Tātobi, instrumental in this whole process. Can you tell us your experience with that type of leadership, but also his contribution to this system we've just spoken about?
So I was very fortunate, as were all of our staff, to be, to have spent time with Tātobi, and so it's probably the most magnificent, 6 years of my life being under such an esteemed leader. And it's really funny because Tātobi, he knew that he was a leader, but he would come into the tari and make himself a cup of tea and make us all a cup of tea. He would sit down with us and have and share his ideas and his thoughts. He would come and sit in staff meetings and listen to what we had to say. So whilst he certainly held that rangatira status, he was just like our koro, our karaua. As I said, we just used to call him Tā. But if I think about him, his technical and academic capability was second to none. So, he would read absolutely everything to do with any kaupapa that was happening. So he was very articulate around answering any questions. He also would go back and look at the history of different decisions. He would understand who were the people that were involved in those decisions. So, his depth of kōrero whenever we met with different government officials or, any manuhere was really astounding. And then his ability to really link te ao Pākehā and te ao Māori together to find, those nuances around how we can work together was incredible. He wasn't a pushover, so, whenever he needed to say the hard things to governors, to our politicians or our ministerial advisors, he would certainly do that, but he would do it with class. And that was one of the things that I certainly learnt about him is, to go hard on a kaupapa, but to go easy on relationships. And that's really important because those same people that you're talking to now and years to come, you'll need to talk to them about other things. So no, he was just an incredible leader.
That is quite an important part. So the purpose of these podcasts is to share our learnings as te Arawa, and what our whānau hapu and iwi can learn from these with regards to the walks of life that they're all coming into. So I want to talk a little bit about when two worlds collide. We've got the Māori world, we've got the Pākehā world, and we've got the legal system and the tikanga system all coming in together and merging, and there's some parts where it's quite hard to do. So with you being in the leadership role that you are in, you're kind of bridging the gap between policy, legislation, Crown, and then you've also got all your whānau hapu and iwi on the ground, and sometimes those things don't marry up. So with your leadership, how have you merged things and brought things together so that the impact or the outcome of those decisions benefit those to come?
I think, if I think back over my time, given that I'm exiting the organisation, I think there's been some amazing things that have happened, and then there's probably been a lot of gaps in reflection. So when I arrived, I spent a lot of time working with the Crown, so I understood, that we were pretty pohara when I joined our organisation. So in terms from a business perspective, making sure that we could be sustainable and move forward. So I spent a lot of time building those relationships. And really for me, what I would say, and I see this a lot with others that engage with the Crown, is that they either come out attack on all fronts, which generally doesn't do well for relationships, or they're very complicit and compliant, and again, that doesn't do well for relationships because you need to set your posture. In my time with the Crown, though, is that they are looking for authentic discussions and authentic discussion and then authentic relationships. So, I would encourage those that are embarking on in this space that it's really important just to be who you are and don't try and change because you're working with the Crown. Set your posture, but understand too that they generally have goodwill and intent, but they just don't have the knowledge in terms of how do they apply that in terms of the relationship and then moving forward.
That's where I want to talk to you a little bit about too, valuing kaupapa Māori, or merging kaupapa Māori into a real heavy, Crown colonial system, but also trying your best as an influencer and an advocate for your iwi and your hapu. How have you actually been able to be that advocate on this side for your hapu and iwi, and when you are engaging with the Crown, what are some examples of that you kind of think are where we should be heading?
I think, as a people, we're pretty magic. We can go into places and we can get to know everyone in the room, because of who we are and who we come from. We can get people telling us all of these stories about what's happened in their life and who their husband is or who their husband isn't, blah, 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 blah. And so really, it's when we take our magic into those relationships whilst maintaining our posture, we become incredibly attractive to the Crown. And so, instead of us trying to go in there and be adversarial, it's about understanding that we've got a whole lot of magic that we can take into a conversation, and then it actually helps, our Crown partners to understand that actually there's this whole invisible part of Te Ao Māori that we hadn't considered, but actually we can't understand why you're affecting our hearts and minds, and so I think that's probably the magic that we need to really own as a people, is that we have the ability to go into different spaces and places and really win people's hearts and minds, because we talk about a kaupapa. We don't go in there talking about ourselves to profile ourselves or to profile, my career, or what I'm hoping to do is that, everyone loves the taiao. Everyone wants to do things that are right for the taiao. Sometimes they just need encouragement around what is right.
You must have some hard conversations though, and challenging conversations sometimes. How do you mediate that? But like you said, you're talking about the tile. You can't argue with the tile. The tile affects everybody. If the water's not at the right, if it's paru, then it's gonna. If it's unhealthy, then our people are going to be unhealthy. Like as Māori and as Te Arawa, we understand that. But how do they understand? How do you convince, or do you even convince, or do you influence them into pushing resource or pushing them to come? How do you shift them to your whakaaro is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I guess that's where having done a management, masters is really useful. Because I can turn on all the te ao Pākehā and the management speak. I can also use financials and numbers to actually paint the picture and talk about the kōrero. And so it's pretty compelling when you look at the investment that's gone in and then the return that's come out. And particularly if you look at degradation across our taiao, it's pretty, you don't even have to say anything because they realise I might have invested $30 million, but the water quality is not improving. In fact, it's declining. So that's, and so sometimes instead of us taking more of an adversarial approach, and by the way, I do have very hard conversations. I don't back down. I am polite, but I'm very clear about what the expectations are. So talking from a tiriti perspective, we are the tiriti partner. I've been mandated by my people to sit here and advocate for our rights. So I'm not going to back down. So we need to find a way to miri that situation. But what I find is that in Te Ao Pākehā, they value pūtea and they value numbers. they kind of value humans, but we're sort of secondary to the point. So I always talk about those things that they value and recognise. It's like when I go, back in with whānau, they want to know firstly what's my whakapapa, do I actually whakapapa there? They want to know who my parents are, my koe and karaua. And then if they've done well, I get the tick. And so in Te Ao Pākehā, it's just understanding what are those things that they value and speaking to them based on those things, and then being very clear around the expectations. I think the other thing too is holding them to account and being able to sit there as you and I are sitting closely together, looking them in the eye and to say, your investment has actually been really poor. And then just sitting in that space and waiting for them to reply.
That must be uncomfortable.
Oh, it is, but hey, that's what I'm there for, right?
Yeah, and you're talking about qualitative analysis versus quantitative, and the two things marrying up. That's their community voice and what's important to them, and explaining that investment versus the numbers and the statistics. Obviously isn't difficult for you. I guess I'm asking, where in the point does your relationship with those crown entities, those ministerial entities, come to a point where the light bulb switches for them and then they all of a sudden value kaupapa Māori? That must have happened a couple of times for you and then sometimes not, and those are the kind of examples I want to kind of talk to you about. Yeah,
it is interesting. I think there are times when you have to tap people in and out. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, no kids.
You have to tap people in and out. So if it's not working with one, move them on.
Yeah. Yeah. Because obviously leadership is always alternative. It changes. There's one person that's in the spot. But I know with you, it's about growing leadership so that you can be replaced by someone who has the same thing. Like for Māori, we all know that there might be one person here, but there's always another 10 or another 15 or even another generation to come who will push that same line. And so I want to ask you around at what point in your leadership do you say, this is where we need to be? Because when I'm looking at the 100-year legacy, and this is only like, as opposed to 1,000 years, our leadership has started from Pūhaurangi, or even further than that. It happened up in Ranginui, because we come from Pūhaurangi. Our whakapapa is intrinsic, and I get all of those things. And then with regards to our recent stamp, which is the 100 years, the thread is very similar. Like, the position is similar, the kōrero is similar. So how do you maintain that? And do you think Te Arawa can still maintain that principle and that says, I want to say mana motuhake, but it's those sorts of things.
Yeah. I think I think a lot of people are going to either agree or disagree with me. I think that we need to be far more forward in sharing, whether it's, we call it mātauranga Māori, I call it our Māori magic, to be honest.
It's access, so.
But the thing is, we have to believe as a people that we can make that change, and so when you get a number of people, that believe that actually we're so good that you really need to be friends with us, when you get, and you can see people, like you look at Mats to me, they just walk in and they just have that knowing, and they're confident. I think that we as Te Arawa should claim it. Where instead of sitting back and waiting, we should go out and claim that.
Do you have any kind of last words that you want to share with everybody?
What I would encourage our people to do is when they have opportunity, take it. Like I didn't grow up thinking that I would be, a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit. I didn't grow up thinking that I would be a black fern. I didn't grow up even thinking I would have a degree. And just for the whānau that, I actually started my master's at 32. So I just thought I'd just be one of the cousins that would, someday get married. I tried that didn't work. Have kids, have the house at Mauria or at Ōtaramarae. So, really for me, it's about understanding when your tupuna move you in different places and to accept it. And, you know, I didn't believe in myself. I didn't think that I could, but I knew I could work. You know, so if someone asked me to do something, I'm happy to, you know, roll up my sleeves and go and do the work. I think the other thing too is that I'm really big on kaupapa. So when there are things that I'm passionate about and I want to support, I just jump in. You know, I think what I find is that, and I meet some incredible young, talented Māori, you know, so I've got a couple that are working with me on my tari at the moment. One of them I've just made as the acting CEO. The other one I'm hoping to step up to do some other stuff as well. You know, is that just believe in yourself, and if you don't believe in yourself, there's actually someone that will believe in you. And so it's just about stepping into those opportunities, you know, believing that you don't have to have all the answers because your tupuna will give you those. Like, I often think about some of the places I get put in and I think, oh, this is what I do. You know, people, they have a karakia at the start and a karakia at the end. I have a karakia all the way through. I'm saying to my kuia karawa, I really have no idea what you put me in here to do, but just give me the right words and I'll say them. You know, and so I have faith in them. I have faith in my family who believe in me. I have faith in, you know, the fact that they put me in these opportunities. So, you know, for me, it's about stepping in there and then just being humble enough to know that some days I have to wear high vis to work because I've got to actually stand at the COVID-19, you know, to put people through. There will be times when I need to lead and there will be times that I need to step back and work. And you know, so I want to encourage, especially our Māori women, you know, I have these incredible Māori women like you and like Lani that's sitting behind me, you know, that do some incredible stuff because they love their whānau and they love the kaupapa. So, you know, I just want to encourage all of those, you know, those wahine especially to step into that space. For those in Te Arawa, I want to encourage us to be far more, I don't want to say aggressive, but I want to say affirmative about what it is that we have and what we do. So I'm, you know, essentially I'm leaving the iwi. I'm going to work for the Crown because I need to learn a whole lot of things for the Crown to come back for our people. But actually there's some things I really want to do. But I want to encourage our Te Arawa whānau to come together collectively because collectively we're incredible, you know, and to believe in that and to support each other with that.
Kapai, hei whakamutu ake wēnei kōrero. I know that the conversation never ends here, but thank you so much for sharing all these insights, all these learnings, and I hope, and I definitely know that it will become a taonga, not just for the generation that we're in now, but for those to come. And that's the whole point of these sorts of kōrero and these wānanga, is to share them openly, like our tupuna used to on the marae and all those sorts of things. So, moku ake, I tēnei kaupapa, tēnā rau atu koe kua takoha mai I wēnei momo kōrero mō wā tātou uri te take. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Ewa.